Hello and welcome to Inside the Piranha Club with me, Markman Bryans.
And me, Ben Hunt, and this is an unusual one, Mark, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah. We don't have any racing at the moment, we don't have any travel at the moment, and we don't have any Rebecca, who is on a well-deserved break before getting back to it for Miami. How have you been, Ben? How's the lawn looking, more importantly?
Lawn looks great. Really happy with the lawn. Very pleased. Got a sofa coming today. Went and brought loads of paint, 12 cans of paint in B&Q yesterday. So, the house renovation is in full swing. So, garden's almost done. And now we're moving into the interior decorating. What did you get up to the weekend?
Absolutely nothing. It was very enjoyable. But the weather was great, wasn't it? We went for a long walk with the dog yesterday, so that was what we got up to. But it was nice and perfect timing for you as well. The sun is very much shining on your artificial turf, isn't it?
Very nice, mate. I went out for a bike ride with my son and realised just how massively out of shape I am. We don't have many mountains or hills around here, but we certainly found a few, and I was realising just how out of breath I was. So, it was good. It was really good fun. Nice time away from Formula One, and just to sort of, digest all what's gone on, really. I want to say a big thank you to Joanne, who messaged me and said about my idea with the ashes in the key ring. I wasn't aware that someone's already got this idea, so that's very disappointing. But she was pointing out that there's someone that started a business who is taking human bodies and using them for compost, which is a novel idea. That kind of takes my plans forward a little bit. So quite like that. But again, someone's beaten me to it, so I need to come up with alternatives. So if any listeners have got an alternative, what to do with someone's ashes, please let us know.
Very much a long-running feature for the rest of the season, hopefully.
Well, it could have some legs in it, couldn't it? It could have some legs.
Bit like your compost.
Well, yes, indeed.
Now, you mentioned there, Ben, there are plenty of talking points around F1 at the moment, despite the fact we have those cancellations of Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. But as listeners will know, we don't focus too much on the intricate technical details here. So instead,
try saying that, Mark, after a few cans of Coke.
Exactly, yeah. We're sticking instead to the MO of the podcast, the Piranha Club, if you like. Christian Horner and Toto Wolff have been rivals at the very top of the sport for a number of years now, battling at Red Bull and Mercedes as the team bosses until Horner's departure last year, of course. Now, their battleground could expectedly now return over a stake in Alpine. But Ben, let's talk about Alpine first before we get on to potential sales and everything. They really struggled last year, but we have seen a huge improvement at the start of 2026, haven't we? Especially for Pierre Gasly.
It's funny, isn't it? Because they were so bad last year, and it was a shame because the previous year, the tail end of that season, things really started to pick up under Ollie Oakes, and there was like a bit of a buoyancy within that team, and then it went into a full reverse. But yeah, no, it's good position for them to be in. I think that we anticipated a little bit of a lift with the Mercedes engine in the back of the car. I think that's no secret that they'd been sort of struggling for a number of seasons while they were persisting with their own engine, and that was obviously hampering them. So, we anticipated a little bit of an improvement, but yeah, no, they've done really well. And I think that even with all the noise behind the scenes going on over the takeover talk, or so much shares and who's buying them, and a little bit of a question mark over drivers, who's going to be in the team next year, etc. To block out all that noise and deliver after such a miserable run is encouraging.
And F1 wouldn't be F1 without a little bit of drama, and it's worth noting, of course, that Alpine felt the need to issue a 1,200-word statement after Japan, basically dismissing claims that the other driver, Franco Colapinto, was being sabotaged, if you like, in inverted commas. Argentine supporters obviously very, very big on Colapinto. We've seen a growth in the sport in that country, and he'll be driving the car there, of course, fairly soon. But there were suggestions on social media that there was a difference in specification between those cars. Obviously, Alpine have completely poo-pooed that. But again, Ben, it's just one of those things we're seeing at the moment, isn't it? Especially, I guess, when you're up against a driver like Gasly, who is arguably head and shoulders above Colapinto in terms of raw ability, isn't he?
A race winner. I think Gasly's always been a fantastic prospect. Maybe not quite had the machinery which to deliver on a regular basis. Time at Red Bull cut very short, and he's looking to make Alpine his home, a permanent home, and an environment that he can flourish in. So, look, I think he is a good driver. He's well liked. Definitely has bags loads of ability, and I'm pleased for Alpine, really, as I mentioned before, just to see them making progress. I want to see Franco Colapinto delivering the form that we saw when he first came into Formula One. I did think the statement was a little bit like 1,200 words. Did you say? I mean, crikey, that's a hell of a lot, isn't it?
Have you ever written a story of 1,200 words, do you think, Ben?
That's a good question. Have you?
Definitely not.
That is quite wordy. Team obviously felt that they needed to say something.
And of course, you mentioned earlier that they're running Mercedes engines this season. We'll come on to why that might be even more important shortly. Without getting all too in depth in the weeds of the business side of this, you can obviously head over.
I know you like these technical chats.
Well, this was going to be my plug. We plug your books every week, but obviously head over to Sector for your F1 business fix. Woo.
There we go.
But of course, Renault opted to step away from power unit production last year, but the French car manufacturer still does control the Alpine team with a 76% shareholding. The remaining 24% is this amount that a Horner consortium and Wolff with that Mercedes link are going to battle over. That 24% is owned by Otro Capital, who in 2023 paid €200 million. So the deal valued the team at that point at around $900 million. And at the time brought high-profile investors into F1. Ryan Reynolds, Rory McIlroy, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Anthony Joshua are all part of that consortium. And that stake obviously is now likely to be worth much, much more. We've seen what's happened with the Mercedes team in particular lately. But Ben, would it be, forget about the money if you like, but would it be a pride thing now for Horner that he wants to get back into F1?
No, I don't think so. I think it always has to be on his terms, because he left in a way that wasn't his terms. If he was coming back, he would want them to be really, send a signal of intent. And I think he would only like to come back if the role is suitable to him. So, for instance, if you look at the situation at Audi where you had Mattia Bonotto and Jonathan Wheatley until recently, that sort of structure wouldn't necessarily work for Horner, because there's a lot of people competing for that same sort of role. I think if he was to go in, he would want to be part owner, which the share issue would allow him to do, but then he would also like to have full control as well, and on the day-to-day running of the business. And I think that while Renault remain the major shareholders in the business, it's always going to be quite difficult for him to run the business on a day-to-day basis if you don't control the main percentage of the shares. So it's a real funny one, because I thought that the deal, in all honesty, I thought the deal would have been done by now. And the longer it goes on, the more unlikely that I think the deal will happen. I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, it feels like it's gone a bit cold.
Yeah, it almost felt start of the year kind of time as a foregone conclusion that would happen, didn't it? I think there were so few obvious doors and routes open to Christian Horner to come back in that as soon as it was clear that percentage stake in Alpine was available, it was almost a foregone conclusion to a lot of people. Maybe a lot of people there have put two and two together and come up with five, but yeah, it is a strange one that if there is interest there from Christian Horner and a consortium of sorts, that it hasn't quite got over the line just yet.
But not only has the team got to be right, Formula One's also got to be right as well, and this maybe feeds into a different topic of discussion, and certainly this is just my speculation. This isn't based on anything that I know as fact, but say, for example, he doesn't like the Formula One that he's watching at the moment, the battery deployment, the super clipping. Formula One's in a bit of a sorry state, really, when you think amount of abuse. Like, I talk to, my family, and they say, oh, Formula One's not having a very good time at the moment. And it's really interesting that you pick up these conversations. That's the narrative. That's not amongst F1 fans. That's just the wider public perception. Would you really want to come back into Formula One if the product that you're working within isn't being deemed as exciting, good as it was before? So, like, the real issue is, does he want to come back to Formula One based in his current regulation state? Who knows? No one knows. That for me is the really interesting proposal. Will he have more interest in investing in the racehorse business? Jerry Horner Racing. That's something that his wife runs, and they're having success there. Would he get more of a return investing money in that side of the business? I don't know, but it's got to give him something back, and I don't necessarily know if you would get the enjoyment back from Formula One in its current state.
Especially maybe Alpine, we've spoken about their improvements, but it's going to take a long time to turn them into what the Red Bull machine he left behind was, if at all that's possible.
Yeah, look, I mean, he turned the Red Bull situation completely on its head, didn't he? From being a fizzy drink sponsor to an all-encompassing team that was winning, and then eventually had its own engine manufacturer in-house. So, you can say that if he was looking to do the same with Alpine, it is a long road ahead before they get back to that situation with the engine department cranking back into gear and then producing the engines. And it feels like a very long-term project. And again, has he got the ambition for a long-term project? I don't know. It would all depend on, the passion for the project, passion for Formula One, the people he's working with, and also that percentage of ownership within the team. There's no doubt that he could work with Flavio Briatore, and I would imagine that he could probably work with Renault now that so much water has gone under the bridge. But it would still be a work in progress to a degree, and just how much enthusiasm he's got for that project. I think that's the key now. I still find it incredible that we're talking about him as a character, as a person, and people wanting him to come back into Formula One because he will inject personality and a bit of life. I think that's really interesting as a topic. We're talking a lot about him, and the movement within other teams as well, rather than the action, which is what we should be talking about on the track.
You covered him, Ben, and Toto Wolff, of course, for many years in the paddock when they were the two big sharks in amongst the piranhas, if you like. Taking them individually, how different are Christian Horner and Toto Wolff as characters and as leaders, I guess, within those structures? Yeah,
very different characters, leaders, backgrounds, both hugely driven, but just intricate personalities, both winners and determined to win. And the way they go about their business is different as well. So, similarities and differences. And I think that tapestry of personalities is what makes Formula One. I think ultimately at the moment we've got too many similar personalities. Low friction, should we say? Even those people that may have been antagonistic in the past are sort of dialed down a little bit now. There's not the animosity within Formula One. I believe the Piranha Club still exists, but it's not operating at the same ferocious level as it once did. And I think that is one of the things that we would like to see in terms of the characters coming back into the sport or developing within the sport, and just seeing a little bit more niggle. I think that everyone's getting on a little bit too well at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe summing that up nicely was the recent quotes from Toto Wolff when he was speaking to Ferrari team boss Fred Vasseur. I've got a few of them here. I'll read them out. I won't do the accent.
Well, I think you should.
Yeah, get the pod cancelled. So speaking about Horner's return to F1, he said that I'm in two minds about it. The sport is missing personalities, and his personality was clearly very controversial, and that is good for the sport. I said to Fred that it needs the good, the bad and the ugly, and now it is only the good and the ugly left. The bad is gone. If there wasn't competitive rivalry over so many years, and if there was more water down the river, I'm sure I could have hung out with him and had dinner and a laugh. Now, I don't quite buy that last point, but it's essentially what you just said, Ben.
Have a laugh, or having dinner and a laugh.
Yeah, I think it is that this sport is about characters. It always has been, regardless of what's happening on the track. You go back to the 70s and before that, it was always about the characters. Now, that used to just be the drivers, didn't it? It was never about the team boss and things, and maybe Drive to Survive changed that, but the paddock is definitely a poorer place without the character of Christian Horner there, isn't it?
Yeah, but isn't all sport driven by characters? I think we can broaden it, can't we? And we've both worked in football for donkey's years, and it was always about the characters, from managers all the way through to the players. And I think that we do miss them when a main character disappears. And we've seen quite a few of them leave Formula One over fairly recent history, and it's a shame that we've lost a few of those. Some I'm not so sad to see disappear, but some of them we do miss. So it's a tricky one. But Formula One, as I say, is just in this funny world at the moment where it's craving some sort of attention for the right reasons, if you like, to take away from some of the negativity that's going on. And people obviously looking in the areas of team ownership and team bosses.
Yeah, and on that, I suppose, we spoke here about maybe Christian coming back and what that would look like. But as we touched on earlier as well, that looks, as it goes further and further along, feels less and less likely to happen. So the other option potentially is that Toto Wolff gets his hand on that stake, that minority stake, and it becomes, could we see maybe then Alpine become, I guess, what VCARB is to Red Bull, and Mercedes almost has a satellite team?
Yeah, how do you feel about that? Because that doesn't really sit massively well. I think that VCARB and Red Bull are, obviously owned by the same parent company, but located in different countries. Although there was a move to bring more of the VCARB stuff to the UK. I don't like these two teams scenarios. Do you? It's a bit like football, isn't it? When you've got owners that own different teams and they ship managers or players around them, and I just don't think that's particularly healthy.
No, not at all. I do think though, if you looked, and this is a big if, but if we looked at last year, and Mercedes could have got their hands on Alpine, and then you think, well, we've got somewhere where we can park Kimi Antonelli here if we can tempt Max Verstappen to come and race for us next year. I suppose it's that a feeder system for drivers and things like that, which can be seen as a good thing, especially up against paid-for drivers. I think that's actually a pathway into the top teams is a good thing to see. But it's also like you said, isn't it? Do you then use them strategically on track to slow down rivals and to play into your own end game, if you like? And that's when it becomes very, very muddy water, isn't it?
And is there ownership rules as into owning two Formula One teams? There probably isn't, then, is there, if Red Bull owned two? Not in the same way that football is governed.
There's certainly nowhere near as tight regulations around it as there would be in soccer, if you like. But yeah, it's worth considering, isn't it? That, and we're not saying obviously that this would suddenly be a Mercedes like, but if there was a stake there owned by a man who also owns and is the CEO and team principal of Mercedes,
it's a conflict of interest, isn't it?
Exactly that. How can it not? No matter what he said or how it was dressed up, it can't be anything but a conflict of interest. I don't think, can it?
I can't remember what happened with Toto's shares in Williams when he took over at Mercedes. Did he have to give up those Williams shares?
They were gone very quickly. Yeah, they were released and gone, and made him a few quid, no doubt. But yeah, again, it's from a sporting regulation side of it. It's almost something that needs to be looked at to lock that off as a thing that could happen, isn't it? Because then what do you do? Does Ferrari think, oh, actually, we need to react to this because two of our biggest rivals have got these satellite teams? You mentioned on an earlier pod,
or have Ferrari. I mean, they've got the technical partnerships already, haven't they, with Haas and Cadillac, for instance. That's a technical partnership, slightly different to owning the team. But of course, we did see partnerships in the past, and then placing drivers at Haas and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? What's allowed and what's not.
If you're a McLaren, now you mentioned earlier on an earlier pod that they had potentially these soundings that they weren't getting everything out of that Mercedes engine that potentially the main manufacturer team were getting. Would that worry them that Alpine also a Mercedes customer engine, but now we own some of them, we're going to make sure they get all these.
Yeah.
It just, like I say, muddying the water might be an understatement. It would just create a world of questions and answers that, as you said before, there's nothing you can say but a conflict of interest, particularly for Toto Wolff, who we believe would be the person who bought those shares rather than Mercedes himself.
Yeah. And also, just thinking, didn't Toto own shares in Aston Martin at some point as well?
Well, he's a rich man. Let's put it that way.
I mean, you could end up with a scenario where he's investing in a number of different Formula One teams, which would be very, very confusing. And you mentioned conflicts of interest, definitely. But yeah, really, really interesting landscape at the moment with regards to Formula One, as I keep saying, and definitely ownership is one area. I mean, I'm wondering how it's going to navigate this enforced break. I wonder how much teams are going to be requested to do media days and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, F1 will be wanting to keep it switched on, won't they? The lights on, if you like. They talk about this always-on sport between race weekends. Well, now we've got a month enforced between races, so it'll be interesting to see what they get up to, whether there'll be media sessions, whether they'll do some social bits and bobs with their drivers. We know drivers' time for the teams, even for the teams, is it's elite, isn't it? They only get them for a certain number of days a year. That's not about to change just because of this. Drivers will be hoping this is some downtime that they wouldn't have been expecting. So if they start getting calls from their teams saying, we want you to come here and do something, then I imagine there'll be some kickback on that.
Yeah, they want to be on the beach, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah, like Rebecca. We asked Rebecca to come on the pod and she said, no, this is not one of my days. I'm building up to Miami now. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Teams, we spoke about it before. They'll be working hard in the factories, but you can't simulate races. I mean, you can do it better than you ever could before, but we don't know what that situation looks like. We don't know whether Honda can suddenly turn up in Miami and they found a way to improve that situation. We don't know if Williams will turn up and they've had a bit of a spring diet and they're suddenly a second a lap quicker, and will people have closed in on Mercedes? So I guess in a weird way it builds up a massive intrigue into Miami, doesn't it? Because we've got such a big gap.
Yeah, and you're going to be there.
Yes, my first race of the year. I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of those that's it's always good to see. There's always so much activation going on. I think so. Yeah, but you're old.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
The activations and stuff around South Beach and things like that, the teams really buy into that. There's a big Mercedes festival. Which would have been for their 1,000th race, but these cancellations mean all of a sudden that it isn't anymore. There's an F1 fan festival as well. It's one of those that there's a reason F1 went to Miami, and I think you see that every year. I mean, Cadillac did a big event last year in May, and they weren't even on the grid until the start of this year. So, for Cadillac and for F1, and it's also Cadillac's first home Grand Prix, of course. So I imagine there'll be plenty of eyes on them as well, despite the fact they are, at the moment, obviously off the pace at the back. But, yeah, it's one of those Grand Prix that is on the calendar now for the modern F1 fan, isn't it? It's not there for the legacy fans, like yourself, Ben.
What's a modern F1 fan? Because, look, I quite like the event. There is a mix of fans there. It's not just corporate. Lots of colour, lots of vibrancy. But how do you find that event, really?
I think, and this is very, sweeping, but a modern F1 fan expects to be entertained all weekend, from the moment they step off the plane to the moment they go home on the Monday or whenever it is. And it isn't just about that 2 hours on a Sunday anymore, which sometimes disappoints anyway still. It used to disappoint even more on a more regular basis. But they want food, they want music, they want noise, they want lights. It's all part of the show now, isn't it? And F1 has become that. F1's tapped into that really well. You only have to look at some of the announcements for the musical acts coming up in Vegas and Silverstone and things like that, where it's all about fan festival and things like that outside of the circuit sometimes. So yeah, I do think that is the buy-in now for F1, and I do think that will have an impact on where F1 goes in the future in terms of race deals. I know Portimao's got 2 years next year, but that's very much a placeholder, isn't it? So whatever comes next will have to have that entertainment infrastructure around the race weekend as well, if you like, rather than just a great track or a great location.
Because my issue is with the Miami race is the fact that a lot is made within F1 circles about it being on the calendar, but I always think about the TV figures, which always seem to suggest otherwise. It's at peak time, and you just presume that more people would be tuning in because this is the narrative that we've been fed in the media for quite some time, and yet the TV figures don't really back that up.
Well, it'll be a good test of this Apple deal for the first time, really, won't it? Because this would have been a big race weekend for ESPN when they were the rights holders for the last couple of years. Will Apple do special things around it as well? Will they activate around it? Will they push more subscribers? Because again, as we mentioned, Cadillac, it's an Apple home Grand Prix, if you like, isn't it? So it'd be interesting to see if they can get an uptick in viewers and subscribers and things like that because of that and because of the timings that are helpful to them. But that's why I think it will be a very interesting race weekend, whether the on-track stuff matches it. It's another sprint as well, of course, which I know you're a fan of. But
I am. That is true. That is true.
There you go, something that actually lights up your eyes. But it is that thing now, isn't it? It's like when we go to Vegas, that first year in Vegas, with all the stuff with the manhole cover and all that kind of stuff that impacted on it. But the show goes on, doesn't it? Very much so in a place like Vegas with the Sphere and all the activations and the hotels and things like that. And yes, that isn't Formula One in inverted commas, if you like, but it is what they are now building. It's why certain brands and certain partners want to be a part of it. It's not for the 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. It's for all the stuff around it where they can activate and showcase their own products and things like that.
Was it the Lego cars last year in Miami?
It was. Lego cars are in Miami, which is the best F1 activation I've ever seen. It was fantastic. I do wonder how you top that. I mean, again, the Disney deal we saw launch in Vegas, will they do something this year? You'd imagine Miami will be a big place for them, especially given that Disney World's just down the road. So, yeah, it could be a very interesting race weekend before we even see a car take to the track, couldn't it?
I'm really curious as to, for American listeners, what they make of the Apple TV offering so far. I mean, have they done much to promote it? Yes, they've got the movie, and yes, there was the initial announcement. But how are they really actively encouraging people to watch the races? And what do you make of it? Really, that's really what I'd love to find out.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let us know.
Yeah, let us know with comments on the pod and on social media and things like that, because we would be keen to know. I think, especially in and around Miami, it'd be a good thing to talk about. Rebecca wrote for the Financial Times about Eddie Q and the deal that's been put in place, and it'd be interesting to see how that has worked for Apple, if it's working for them, and not from, they're not going to give us the numbers, but just from an audience perspective, are they happy with it? Do they still scroll all the way to the bottom of Apple TV to find the Sky Sports coverage, which we know is where it's been buried on there? Yeah, so do let us know. And thank you for joining Ben and I on this special episode. We'll be back next week with Rebecca, hopefully for you, me, and the listeners. But we have plenty more to come ahead of the return of F1 in Miami next month. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.